Hi, my name is Levi Knight, Youth Program Coordinator for the Mighty Creatives, and you're listening to the Mighty Voices podcast. I'm joined today by a few guests, actually. We've got 2 members from our youth board, and we've also got 2 members from Rutland. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Hannah, and I'm on the youth board.
Hi, I'm Maisie, and I'm also on the youth board.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hermione, and I'm from Rutland. I'm Skye from Rutland.
Brilliant, thank you. Nice to meet you all. What the Mighty Voices podcast is, this is a place where we discuss topics that concern young people and the role creativity has to play in these topics. So to get started, we're going to have a little icebreaker question. So what I want to know is, what book are you reading, or what piece of art have you seen, heard, or discovered this week that's had an impact on you? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Wicked, I like that, Hannah.
So I have just finished my foundation in musical theatre, and for that I created a piece of art with all of us on it because we didn't have a photograph of everybody, like the whole cohort. So I drew one instead on digital art, and then we made it, and then one of the other girls made it into a keyring. So we've all now got a little digital art of us.
That's amazing.
So everyone's got a piece to remember.
Oh, that's amazing. Well done. Yeah.
Well, I've just finished doing an essay on surrealism, so I've been going into the works of Salvador Dali, and he is a very quirky person, and his artworks really get you to think about the human mind and its correlation connections with reality. So
Did you do the melting clocks?
Yeah.
you did.
No, the persistence of memory.
Oh, okay.
That painting.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of him walking anteaters through Paris.
He's a very bizarre individual.
Yeah.
He did very,
A little bit. Current affairs, April 2024 is Autism Acceptance Month. So Autism Acceptance Month is an annual event that aims to promote not only awareness of autism and autistic people, but also increase acceptance. This month is a celebration that helps understanding and gets rid of any prejudices that people may have towards autism. This is done in a variety of ways. Workshops and events are held to educate people on autism in both everyday life and with those who work with families or young people to help them. Raising awareness and acceptance of autistic people and how we can help support them is vital in creating a kinder, empathetic world. However, Autism Acceptance Month is not just about how we can help autistic people feel supported, but it's also about showing their strengths. In challenging our pre-existing biases and prejudices about autism, we can help empower autistic people and recognise the array of wonderful qualities that come with being on the autistic spectrum. In 2024, the theme is Celebrate Differences. This means that this year, Autism Acceptance Month will be dedicated to celebrating the differences in autistic people to help develop a greater sense of inclusivity. For more information on how you can get involved, visit Autism Acceptance Month 2024 on twinkle.co.uk. Today we want to think about if creativity can help everyone feel included. What do you think of when we say creativity? I'm going to start with Maisie.
I say an open space that's safe where you can express whatever you want to express in whatever way you want to express it.
I like that. I do. I really like that. What about you, Hannah?
Yeah, no, I view creativity as a way to kind of like when Maisie said, like express yourself, but also like I think creativity is like a way of being, like a way of learning. Like you can like, and I think there's so many different forms of creativity, like in terms of obviously it's so much more than just art, and it's also like in terms of like drama, dance, but also like gaming is a form of creativity. Just being able to kind of escape kind of the world and into like somewhere where you can kind of switch off from other things and just be. And I think that's why I view creativity as a place where for me I feel really like calm and safe, and I don't have to think about all these different rules that the world and society have, because because there are no rules, there's no right or wrong when it comes to creativity.
Completely agree.
So I just can do whatever.
Completely agree. I feel like creativity is like throwing the rule book out the window.
Yeah, it's like there's
no
rules, there's no right
no
or wrong.
Rules. I agree with what you guys are saying about in terms of expression and being able to think out the box, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an art form. I feel like I creatively do the school run in the mornings with my young children. So it's like
it's a way of doing things outside the box. Like it's just a way of authentically being yourself and doing whatever you do, and to you can do anything creatively
100%.
if you're doing it a way that is the way that feels natural and best for you, like true to how you feel.
And I think creativity also enhances where it's simply for you. Do you know what I mean? It is something individual to yourself that works for you. Something that works for you might not work for the next person, but it works
so
for
individual.
you.
So
You know what I
such a like for me, I used creativity in my journey of like learning who I was and like truly finding like my authentic self. And that's how using creativity, because there is no right or wrong. I couldn't like get it wrong. I couldn't fail at it. And so I could use that as like a way to like learn who I really am. And then from there, I've been able to like build my confidence because I now know who I am through finding creativity.
I think you make a really good point there. I think it's important, like with creativity, being creative, it gives you the confidence of knowing there is no right or wrong answer. Do you know what I mean? And I think, especially as young people, when I was younger, I was crippled sometimes by the fear of getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think when you look at something creatively, there is no right or wrong answer. So it kind of eliminates that fear, if that makes sense, and anxiety. Hermione? So in terms of creativity, is there anything that you can think of?
How about you dance, Hermione?
Do you dance?
Favorite form of creativity?
Yeah, talking to the mic. Let's hear your so you do a bit of dance, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, how long have you done that for?
I started like this time last year.
Okay, brilliant. And you enjoying that?
Yeah.
What kind of dance is it?
Street dance.
Street dance, okay. I make music, I've got a few videos out on YouTube and songs, so if you want to check me, Strizzy Strauss on all platforms. But yeah, man, keep the street dance up, and you never know, you might be a backup dancer for me. Do you do anything creative, Skye?
I mainly just draw.
Draw? Nobody just does anything. We're going to start that bit again, yeah? When you tell me about your drawing, you say, I draw, Levi. Not I just draw, because it's more than just doing something. Do you get what I mean? You're creative. So, Skye, do you do anything creative?
Draw.
Yeah, I like that.
So what type of things do you draw?
Like hybrids.
Ah, that's cool. Yeah, I know a couple of people that do similar things.
Wicked, wicked. Moving on to the next point, do you think creativity plays a role or can play a role in Autism Acceptance Month?
Absolutely.
Okay, Hannah, you got this one. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I think absolutely. As we said, like creativity can be anything, and therefore, I think what's lovely about creativity is the fact that it's so individual, and I think that's the same thing with being autistic. Being autistic is such an individual experience. No two autistic people are the same, and I think for me, like being autistic means that I don't necessarily view the world in the same way that maybe neurotypical people view the world, but through creativity, I can make sense of the world myself, and I can use it as a way to express the thoughts and the feelings and the things that I want to say that I might not be able to articulately say in words because I can't necessarily understand what it means, but I can write a poem, or I can draw, or I can do a dance, or I can make a video, and then I can express what I'm feeling through that.
Do you have any ways in which Autism Awareness Month could be promoted a bit better? Because I know we had a few discussions before we started where we were saying it's kind of, if you know about Autism Awareness Month, then you know that. But if you're not aware of that, then it's not something that kind of comes across your radar. Do you think there's any ways that we could?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, first of all, I would say is that Autism Acceptance Month isn't just for 1 month. Autism Acceptance should be year round.
I like that.
365 days a year, every year. But I think it's interesting being in the kind of charity, advocacy, activism world, especially in relation, a lot of it to neurodivergence. I think I find that I was quite aware of, like, I was seeing quite a few posts. One of the charities on the different charity that I work with, I'm now helping them with their social media. So I posted a few things, but it's interesting hearing from other people that maybe actually it's kind of only reaching the people who already know, and actually maybe we need to take it out further. And I think that can be done through definitely like spotlighting. I believe that it should come from autistic people themselves. Like we know ourselves, we know the best, so it should come from us. Yeah. But I think like mainstream media, that's what everyone sees. Like we spoke earlier about a kind of spark, and like the idea that something like that is kind of allowing autism to be put into the spotlight, and the fact that actually autism isn't just the 4-year-old boy rocking in the corner with headphones, and actually there's loads, it's a whole different thing, and actually kind of the acceptance comes from learning that autism isn't a one-size-fits-all. And I think through that we need to kind of spotlight all different kinds of autistic people and through all different kinds of means.
I completely agree. You got any thoughts on that, Maisie?
I think Hannah said a lot. Just a minute to think.
Yeah, man.
It's the ADHD.
Because I think I agree with you where you're saying autistic people should be the ones promoting it. I don't say should be in a negative way. I think
100%.
it makes it more empowering and inspiring. And I remember there was like a campaign a few years ago when dyslexia was kind of raising its profile, where you had few people where they were saying Richard Branson was dyslexic. There was a lady from a program called My Family. I can't remember her name. I'm sure she's in Harry Potter as well. I don't know her name off the top of my head, but I think those things there really help, because my brother has dyslexia, and I've got a friend that's got dyslexia as well. And I think now dyslexia is quite norm. It's quite normal as in terms of the population know about dyslexia. Do you know what I mean? And I think it helped having those famous people or those people of note promoting it on posters like, I have dyslexia, I've got it. So
I think that's kind of why they changed it. It used to be autism awareness, and I think there is a lot more awareness, but there's such a difference between awareness and acceptance and understanding of the kind of, we might be, I do think people are more aware of autism and what autism is in terms of their own perception of what being autistic is. But I've, in my own experience, seen that actually, it's so different for everybody, and actually people are still quite narrow-minded in some ways of what being autistic is. And especially I've recently had a different quote, not the ones I told you earlier, but there was a quote about the fact that I'll come back to me.
Yeah, we will.
I'll come back to you with the
I
quote.
was gonna say, going off what you were saying about people not necessarily knowing what autism is, in terms of the creativity, I think particularly with like local organisations, I think particularly with like the theatre and the dance, as Hermione said that she's interested in, a lot of places, I think, like particularly theatres and stuff, could probably show or maybe get more autistic people involved, particularly over this month. As you said, obviously it's not just a month, it's for the whole year, but as a start for a month, they could do shows or films that involve those people. So for example, I'm from Nottingham, so Nottingham Theatre could put on or have particular days where they had an autistic theatre group, and they showed that, and people would go, and it's just seeing that autism isn't just what's labelled as it is, and that you can be creative by being autistic, and that it's not just those kind of pre-expectations that everybody has.
100%.
But you don't see many stuff. I remember going to the theatre quite a lot, and it's always really, really professional companies, and it's always like you never get either the up-and-coming kind of people, or you never get the kind of people with disabilities, or people, you never get any of those groups. It's always like the big theatre groups. So I think that would be something that they probably could do.
I hear that. So Hannah, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think in terms of getting autistic people to be able to portray autistic characters, I think it's so important that autistic characters are portrayed by autistic people. I think otherwise it's like, in terms of any character that's got a specific characteristic should be played by the person who is, because that just makes the most sense.
I agree with that. You got any thoughts on this one, Skye?
In A Kind of Spark, there's like some of the producers and actors were autistic, playing autistic roles.
Oh, okay, that's brilliant. How does that make you feel? Did that make you want to watch it even more? Did you feel like you could relate to something? Because for me, there's certain musicians that I listen to because I can relate to what they're saying, and that I see something in musicians that I listen to.
Yeah, it was like really, I don't know, it was just nice.
Yeah?
Do you feel represented?
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Moving on to the next part, we've got the role that creativity plays in equality, diversity, and inclusion. What words do you think of when we say equality, diversity, and inclusion? We'll start with, you got any views, Skye, actually? I'm sure we were speaking about safe earlier. Do you still feel like safe is a word that we can relate to equality, diversity, and inclusion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like that one. What about you, Hannah?
Well, I've got my quotes.
Oh no, here we go.
I won't do all of them, but I feel like
Give us your top three.
top three. We might have to go to Maisie while I'm choosing my top three. I've got 10 to choose from.
I was going to say, alongside equality, diversity, inclusion, I think you have to include equity. In terms of like, equality is everybody having the same opportunities, but equity is giving everybody the same, It's like building blocks. If somebody needs one building block to get to the same level, some people will need 3. It's like measuring that.
So it's kind of like ensuring each individual person is enabled and able to achieve, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Do you
and
get what I mean?
gets what they need. So I think people need different things.
Okay.
So making sure that you're not giving everybody the same thing, you're catering to each individual person on what they specifically need in order for them to get an equal level as everybody else.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I like that. A word that I would link to it is openness. I think there needs to be a degree of openness when you're incorporating EDI or you're trying to improve it, or any topics surrounding EDI. I think there needs to be an openness, because I think the issue why I feel, not personally, why there may be confusion around the topic or not so much uptake of EDI is because there isn't an openness, there isn't a dialogue, a conversation isn't being had that needs to be had. And I think having an open and honest conversation, it enhances all things in life. Do you know what I mean? So I think being open and honest is a word that I'd associate with it. You got your quotes,
I have, and I've got 4 because I don't ever do what I'm told. So
I'll let you creativity and all
yeah,
that.
I'm being creatively choosing 4 instead of 3.
Yeah.
We've got diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice heard.
Love that. Please email me these.
Yeah, I will. It is not inclusion if you invite people into a space that you are unwilling to change. Mic drop.
Nice.
That's my favourite.
Please don't drop the mic.
Okay. Fairness does not mean everyone gets the same. Fairness means everyone gets what they need.
Perfect. That's similar to what you were saying.
That, yeah.
And then equality is treating everyone the same, but equity is taking differences into account so that everyone has the chance to succeed.
That's what I was trying to
Absolutely.
say, said in better words.
I like that, Hannah. I really like those. What about you, Hermione? You got anything?
Not really. I think I don't really know.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
I think being able to communicate with different people, so obviously friends, but also teachers, I think.
Communication is definitely key.
And being able to communicate in different ways, because talking isn't the only form of communication.
Is there
There's so many better ways to communicate than just talking.
Is there any ways in school that you can communicate in different ways? So either by drawing or dancing or by not having to answer questions, different ways that things can be altered to suit you.
Well, they say talking is only a small piece of communication, isn't it?
I should have said at the beginning with the creativity. I think creativity is a form of communication, and it's
100%.
one that I use.
100%.
It is the one I use, actually.
And it's interesting you say that, because I think creativity is a language. It's a language that
It is,
everybody
yeah.
understands.
Exactly.
Everybody, whether it be art, music, the way something's done, people can see and read and understand creativity. Yeah, that's interesting. Next question I've got. What are your thoughts on the role creativity has when exploring equality, diversity and inclusion? Well, we kind of touched on that already about being creative in terms of exploring EDI. Do you know what I mean? And we spoke about before we started how a musician or any piece of artwork, it includes, it brings people to the table and it brings people together. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't matter who's created the piece of artwork. Let's say, for the sake of the argument, it draws people in. Art's a two-way street. You get what I mean? It's like it makes the viewer feel included, and also the artist. It's where we meet. Do you know what I mean?
And even just when you're making things, like if you're doing something creative with the people, if you're with people you like, when you're doing it, that can feel like a really inclusive place, because you're with people who think and like do the similar things that you're doing, and it can be a space where you can all just kind of create. And what I really like sometimes about creativity, especially being autistic, is I am social, but sometimes I don't want to be social. But actually, you can be with other people and be creating, but you don't actually have to speak to anybody. Yeah. So you can just be like, so you're with other people, so you don't like get lonely, but like you don't actually have to talk. And actually, I think there's a lot of inclusion in in socializing in a way that doesn't involve having to just talk and touch everybody and cuddle and all that kind of stuff, because there's a lot people do, they just like they meet and they want like a big hug and you're like no. But like when you're doing creative, you can just be like, oh, you know what, we're going to both be here, we're here together, but like don't talk to me, I'm doing mine but you're doing your bit.
You can be who you are.
Exactly.
You can be who you are. Hermione, do you feel like being involved with street dance, do you think that makes you feel a sense of inclusion?
Yeah.
Yeah? How does it make you feel included? I don't want to trip you up, sorry. I'm trying to not make it interviewee.
It's just like, it doesn't matter if you're like good and you can just be yourself in it.
Yeah. I can echo that.
I was going to say, do you have lots of friends in the group that make it more fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's always to have that.
And out of interest, you know the dance group, is it a dance group for autistic young people or is it a dance group for all people?
It's a dance group for like everyone.
I think that's brilliant. And I think that's where the steps are going to take place in terms of inclusion and things like that. I think it's difficult for me. This is just my personal opinion. I don't like the separation of people sometimes. I think sometimes you need to in certain settings, but I think with creative, like the arts and things creative, I don't think there's a need to separate someone's got autism and somebody hasn't got autism, or someone's this or someone's that. I think it's a perfect opportunity for everybody to come together like a pot of gumbo. You get what I mean? So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Have you got any views?
Well, I was just about to say, one going off about everybody coming together and doing different things. When I was doing, in one of my art classes, the teacher, first time I'd experienced this was at college rather than at school, and my art teacher came around and she let everybody do what they wanted to do in whatever way they wanted to do it, and then we'd all have a chat about what we were doing. And it was really interesting because I'd be doing like more traditional art history kind of stuff, so like realistic painting and like oil painting, and somebody else would do like collaging and doing like can't think of the word, but
something creative.
Something creative. So they were doing like about natural decomposition in like the natural world, and they were doing like I had a bit of like a occult kind of witchcraft like kind of twist to it, and that was really interesting because that was their interest. So having them be able to do that, me be able to do something very different. Somebody else was doing like textiles and fashion, like to have all those different things in the class come together. It was the same class, but we were able to do such different things. And I think that was something that really worked.
Do you think that creativity brought the people inside that group together?
Everyone enjoyed it more.
Right.
So I think when everybody enjoys things more, people are more likely to talk. Very relaxed atmosphere. That was my safe space in college. I did other lessons that weren't quite the same, but that was my safe space. That's where I went to eat my lunch.
Nice.
That's where I went on my breaks. That's where I went on my free periods, because I trusted the people and I felt safe in that environment because I was able to experience that openness and just being yourself aspect of it.
And it comes back to that creativity allows you to be yourself, and it's a language everybody understands. Do you know what I mean? So with you all being creative in that room, the impression I'm getting is you were all able to express who you were and you were accepted for who you were. So then it made it easier. So like you said, it was a safe space for you to go and have your lunch and things like that.
The biggest one was the teacher. First time I'd experienced a teacher putting the student before the curriculum.
Right.
And she came round, and I had a previous art teacher that was these are the boundaries, you have to stay within them in order to get your grade. And she came round and she said, "What do you want to do?" And I just went, "Sorry? What do you mean? Well, shouldn't you be telling me what to do?" And so I think her actually having that trust in us also made us feel more like grown-ups, more like we were being respected. So I think that really had a bit of an impact. So teachers is definitely
It's great to hear that. At TMC, we do creative mentoring, and the first question that the mentor asks the young person is, "What would you like to do today?"
It's mind-boggling. I was like,
do you know what I mean?
"You're asking me?"
Do you know what I mean? I think that's that sense of inclusion again and that empowerment. And yeah, man, that's brilliant. You got anything for us, Skye?
You mentioned you had a teacher that in the past you'd had teachers and that made your experience at school not very nice. But since getting a new teacher, it had improved. Is that right?
Yeah.
Maybe in a school setting, do you think it's the teacher that has quite a large influence and impact on how you perceive school or that particular class?
Yeah.
Yeah? So would you say that the teachers you've got now are more, what would you say they are?
How do you feel when you're with them?
Happier. Definitely.
Like that. Final question on that topic is, do you think we should be looking at more creative ways with regards to improving EDI? equality, diversion, and inclusion.
Hannah's raring to
I
go
had,
on
I had
this
a,
one.
Go on,
it
Hannah.
was, you know that
Chomping at
autistic
the
thing
bit.
though. You know when you've got it in your head and you're like, I'm going to lose it. So all I was thinking of was repeating it
Was
over
that
and
your
over. That was what that
moment?
was just trying to keep it in my head. Now I don't even know whether it's even still there. No, it is still there. Yes, it is still there. I was going to say that it was kind of in relation to that, but then going into the other one because so
That's
fits
fine.
perfectly.
That's fine.
The idea that actually being autistic isn't a disease. It's not inherently a deficit. It is, unfortunately, because we are in a world that is created for neurotypical people, and therefore being neurodivergent, being different, isn't going to fit in to the neurotypical standard of the world. And actually, you know, being autistic is just a different way of viewing the world. It's a different neurotype, and actually there are lots of different neurotypes out there. And actually, if we had a society that was inclusive and that wasn't based purely on what has been created as a normal, but what even is normal? Because normals, if we were in a world that had been started by neurodivergent people and was autistic,
would be the
we'd be in an autistic world, and therefore actually us here we'd be thriving, and it'd be the other people doing a podcast about being neurotypical. So I think I definitely think that actually, and I think it did link to what Maisie said, but I'm not going to lie, am I going to be able to find the link now? I doubt it. The idea that actually, you know, if you're inclusion and diversity and all of those things actually is by just everyone being my favourite, another quote, but this is a quote that I wrote actually. Inclusion isn't about being the same, but it's being allowed to be different. And the fact that actually that is the key, that we are all different, and that autism isn't a bad thing, actually. Yeah. Surprise! And I love being autistic. And the fact that actually, if we were lived in a world where we can allow people to just be who they are, then it would be, those of us would struggle probably slightly less. And I think that was then linking, it's got a link, to the idea of using creativity. And for me, as a social activist and advocate for neurodiversity, mental health, young people, I use creativity. Creativity is my weapon of choice in my fight for creating a fairer and more just world. And I think that creativity has such power to do that. And like that's what I'm going to go on to do my degree in. And the fact that I believe wholeheartedly that it is a tool for activism, it's a tool for change, it's a tool for political change. But it equally was going to mention with the creative mentoring, like when I heard of the creative mentoring, I was like, why was that not around when I was younger? Because the idea of, as a young, 10, 11, 12-year-old little Hannah, if she'd had the opportunity to kind of use creativity and learn, and from, older autistic people. Now I'm a mentor for a different charity in terms of autism, and it's so interesting to be able to see and to be able to go, for people to see that actually, even when you're in the moment, actually there is hope, and there's like that finding your identity, and that there are older autistic people who are living a life that you could never have dreamed you were going to be able to live. And I think creativity has the power to help people achieve that.
I think so. And just going off what we spoke about today, I think creativity knocks down walls. And I keep saying the same thing. It's like it's a language that everybody understands and we can all talk. With your experience, Hermione, being in the dance group, do you get what I mean? I think there's more things of that nature where there isn't a divide or a split. It doesn't even matter, to be fair, whether you're autistic or not. Do you get what I mean? It's all about being creative and building a connection. I think that creativity creates an inclusion without having to go outside of that creativity to create inclusion. Am I making sense?
There's a quote that links to this we had earlier. Are you ready?
Go on.
Right. It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognise, accept and celebrate those differences.
100%. And that ties into Autism Acceptance Month, because this year it's all about celebrating differences.
Not
and
my first rodeo.
I think that's what needs to be done a lot more. Let's celebrate our differences. I think we fight so hard nowadays. I'm on my soapbox right now. I apologise. I get like this from time to time. But I feel like people fight so hard to fit in and appear to be like the next person, when really we should sit down in our individuality and celebrate the differences. Do you know what I mean? Like, I hate parsnips.
Yeah. Don't eat
I
parsnips.
cannot eat parsnips.
Life's too short to eat parsnips. You don't need to
Like,
eat parsnips.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but I'm comfortable in sharing
Yeah.
that. It's like,
Yeah,
I don't
well
like
done.
parsnips, but you might.
I also don't like parsnips, but, someone in here might like parsnips. So
we're closer even now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But we'll include the people who do like parsnips.
This is it.
In the
It's not
podcast.
against people that like parsnips, whatever you like. But I've gone on a tangent, but you get what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I like that.
think that I had it again. Classic self-promo, but you know what else are you going to do in life? That's how you get through. I wrote a blog called "I Don't Want to Be Included, I Want True Inclusion," and that was about the fact that the education system is literally a sausage factory, and that's how I describe it. It's producing perfectly uniform sausages that cannot deviate from the norm. And I think that with what you were saying about the fact that like be a broken sausage, and that be a bent sausage, be a different kind of, be a veggie sausage. I'm vegetarian, and actually, it's much more exciting if we're all different kinds than if we're all the same.
This is it.
I was going to say, I think creativity, particularly when you're young, and I think continuing into adulthood and when you're a teenager, creativity is part of development, and people forget that, particularly schools. There are some things that happen, like you might make a poster or you might do a collaborative group work, but it very rarely happens because you're constantly doing writing and it focuses on one part. And I think there's some other schools in different countries that do the education system differently, and they've actually had much higher success rates than the current education system, because I think they do prioritize all aspects of development rather than academic.
My foundation in musical theatre, and the person who ran that was very passionate about like doing things differently, and his whole thing was like literally the whole year was basically like undoing all the things that you've learned at school, like, because creativity is literally the opposite of school. School is the opposite of creativity, and actually the whole course, like to be an artist, and being an artist doesn't mean you just draw. Being a creative person, and actually our whole course was undoing everything that school had taught us about like being a right and wrong.
Let me play devil's advocate then. Is it the government rather than the schools?
Yeah, 100%.
Where the issue lies, because I feel like sometimes schools are more
I was going to say
results based.
Going off, you said
it's actually society. Actually, the whole system, but it does come fundamentally from the government. There are definitely bad eggs out there in the world, and I think there are definitely people who aren't. And they, you know, there are sadly there are a lot of not very nice people, but fundamentally, like having worked inside the education system as well, there are some amazing teachers out there, and I personally had an awful time at school. I hated the whole of school, didn't like any of it. But having seen it from a different side, there are teachers who care so deeply, but are not allowed because the system is becoming more and more regimented. My mum's a teacher, and now she teaches reception, and every single child has to learn the same phonic on the same day.
Right.
Which is just bonkers, because I mean that's just something that academically that not even normal children aren't going to all learn our book on the same day, are they? Like, that's not how it works. And actually, teachers are having to break the rules to be able to be inclusive, to be able to welcome. So the ones that are being inclusive are breaking the rules, and that comes down to why are they having to break the rules? Because the system is created. They literally want robots to be teaching our children. That's what they want. They want it all to be the same every single day, all doing it all at the same time. And what does that come down to? Yeah, obviously there will be teachers out there who maybe agree with that system, but ultimately they're working within a government system, and I'm afraid there are people who are in charge of that government system, and they are the ones that are responsible.
Yeah, going off of that though, I think based on my school experience, there are guidelines and there are ways that schools have to do things, but there are also within the school there is a certain amount of leeway that school can change what they're doing to adapt to everybody, because something that one of my schools didn't do, which then I later learned from college, in terms of A-levels, GCSEs, they have the same guidelines in terms of how they get students to pass and the way that it's taught. And they need to teach the same content, but college did it exceptionally differently than sixth form.
Colleges do have more leeway though than statutory mainstream school.
And you know what?
Depends though, because in a sense, yes, but I sort of viewed it was just a college in name. It's because it was specifically for the same thing that a sixth form taught. It was exactly the same. So I just saw it as that. But the way that they taught, like, it was just made you feel more grown up, more accepted, more like you actually developing rather than just being, I'm stuck here until I turn 18. It was more of this is a stepping stone to helping me in the future, rather than just this is something I have to do because the government says I have to do it. Yeah. I think there are leeways within those government restrictions that people can adapt.
They're trying to get rid of them.
I opened a can of worms there, didn't I?
or else.
Just
Kind of but we segue nicely onto the next topic, which is, what is your experience of equality, diversity, and inclusion in your everyday life and school? What works well for you, and what could be better?
Well, what to say on this? This is a big point. I would say inclusion is the bee I have in my bonnet of life.
I believe
and
that.
And I believe in. Another quote. She's here for the quotes. I don't want to be included, I want true inclusion. And I think there's such a confusion between what actually inclusion means. And I think for me, growing up through school was awful. And I wasn't necessarily included, but in some ways I was so glad I wasn't included because it was horrific. And I wouldn't want to have done most of the things. And I think I didn't know the difficulties that I had when I was growing up through school, and I think a lot of things were happening in my life that nobody picked up on. And I think interesting though, even now that I am very open about my difficulties and my diagnoses and labels or whatever you want to call them, and the fact that even now it is still a fight every single time I do anything to be treated the same as other people. And I think it's bonkers to think I think we can kind of sometimes get into this stage where we think, surely, some of these things don't still happen, and they do still happen. And it's bonkers to think that, for example, like just before Christmas, in something that I ended up not being able to take part in because of being autistic. And you think, surely that is not something that's happening in a developed country, in 2024, 2023, but it is, and people still don't. It's that idea that we are all accepting until it's something that makes us feel uncomfortable or makes us feel vulnerable. And that idea that actually true inclusion is you're able to, sit with your own uncomfortable feelings of how something might be looking, and it might be not a way that you would do things. It might even look strange or abnormal to you. But actually, as long as that person isn't hurting anybody else, isn't hurting themselves, isn't interfering with anybody else, it's absolutely fine for them to do it that way. There's no reason why they can't do it that way. And I think it's definitely learned that from college, my foundation that I've just done, the idea that people still think that inclusion is being in the same room and doing the same thing as other people at the same time. And it's so not. And it really doesn't have to be. And the fact that I am good at things, I have strengths. I'm not just, but that I will need to do things differently. I am disabled. I will, for the rest of my life, need accommodations. I will never, ever be able to just sail through life. But actually, that's okay. But I need other people to be able to be accepting of that. And when I say I can't do that, it's not going, oh, you know what, I'm not really fancying it today. Would rather not. It's, no, I really can't do that. But I'm offering you here all the ways that I would be able to do it. And I will get the same outcome, if not a better outcome, at the end of it. But I need you to be able to let me work in my way.
It sounds like a lonely fight.
It's an exhausting fight. That's what I found.
I don't have autism. Do you get what I mean? So I don't know. I've been able to go through life, not really have to. There's other ways where I don't feel equality included. Do you get what I mean? But it was kind of like, I feel it's a lonely fight for you guys. I'm not saying you guys. Even then, even me saying you guys. Yeah. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it's ingrained in people where there's, it's not my problem.
It's just as simple as you just then said, I don't have autism. And for me, I would never say I have autism. I would say I am autistic.
Do you understand
purely
what I'm saying?
Because I prefer the identity first language, because I don't believe being autistic. I would say, because I have celiac disease, because I can't eat gluten. So I have that. That's like not part of me. But for me, being autistic, it isn't that thing that like I'm like, oh, autism is all that defines me. But actually, being autistic, being ADHD, having a pathological demand avoidance profile of being autistic, without that, I am not me. And that's not saying that those things define me, because they don't. But it's just the same as who I am. Like, I've got brown hair. Like, I'm not defined by my brown hair. I don't go around every day being like, guys, everybody, I have brown hair. But I just do have brown hair. And the same with like being autistic is that the way I am and the reason I have the passions and the hobbies and the way I speak is because that's my neurotype. But and I wouldn't be the same if I wasn't autistic, ADHD. But that doesn't mean it defines me. It just is part of me.
So do you think, what's your support system like? Do you know what I mean? Like when you was growing up and things like that.
I had a very tricky growing up in terms of like other things, in terms of not just being undiagnosed neurodivergent, and I think that obviously definitely impacted my mental health in other ways. And I think that definitely added to a lot of issues that I struggled with. But now it's definitely taken a long time, and unfortunately, you know, the services we've got in this country are very overstretched and underfunded, and I was under CAMS for a long time, and then under adult services, spent a lot of time in hospital, and it wasn't the right place. And I think, you know, that's a topic conversation for a different day. My opinion on hospitalisation of autistic people, that's a whole different day. But I think there's such a lack. There is such a lack of support. I mean, I remember I got diagnosed the day before lockdown, literally bombshell, you're autistic, see you later, goodbye. And actually for me, I used creativity as my journey to find out what being autistic meant for me. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, helping other young people and other people who are diagnosed as autistic to be able to find out what being autistic means to you. And I think, you know, the idea of like creative mentoring, I definitely think that creative mentoring could be taken into kind of the field of neurodivergence in terms of like wellbeing mentor. I'm a wellbeing mentor, and that whole idea that actually I think every single diagnosed neurodivergent person should have a mentor, someone older who's been there, done that, worn the t-shirt. Absolutely will be different because we're all very different, but the idea that, you know, just a guiding hand in terms of like, because I definitely for me grew up feeling completely broken. I felt like this broken horse, and actually no, I'm not a broken horse, I'm just a zebra. Another quote for you there. And that idea that there are people out there that will understand you and be your people, and you're not going to have every person, and that's okay. But definitely, I think so many of the kind of big issues that we face as autistic people could be changed with proper support, proper acceptance, proper education, proper understanding, and systems that are in place where young autistic people and anyone who finds out that they're autistic or ADHD or any kind of neurodivergence gets those mentors, so people who've been there. And I think I obviously can't speak for my mentee who I've worked with, but you know, she just said she did say that I have never in my life had anyone who's first of all spent as much time actually wanting to help and who actually gets it. And although we're very different in terms of how we are autistic, just knowing that there's someone out there who gets you is such a massive thing.
You're amazing, Hannah. I think you're a great advocate for autism, and I think we'll change the world, man. Let me know what you need me to do. We're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Because you've got that passion. Don't ever lose that passion. Do you know what I mean? I think you're an inspiration.
Thank you.
Like, not just for autistic people. I think you're an inspiration for all. Do you get what I mean? Like, you've got such a passion, and yeah. Anyway, I should be saying this after the podcast, but I'm just giving you your flowers.
It is the drive that gets me up every day when I think of. Like, I think it was, I was on Instagram the other day. This is a random tangent, you know, to lighten the mood. Well, it's not even going to lighten the mood, actually. I was on Instagram anyway, and it was all about existential depression, and I was like, that is a lot. Because I was like, actually, but then I realised I probably did. And I was like, because people were like, oh, you know, the whole world just seems so horrible and evil, and there's so many bad things happening. And then they were like, well, just don't think about them. And actually, for me, this is what I do instead. Instead of like not thinking about it, I think, you know what? No, one person can't change the world, but if we don't start, we'll never see what happens.
And conversation, dialogue. Thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing that. So, Maisie, have you got any thoughts on your experience of equality, diversity, and inclusion in your everyday life and school, and what works well for you and what could be better?
A big example would be the transition from secondary school to college, because secondary school was very rigid. There was not many adaptations, and it was all they had a pastoral ladder, and the pastoral ladder was set with just 5 different levels, and that was just how it was for everybody. And they basically tried to apply me and my situation, where there's mental health, there's a couple of family things, there's a lot going on, also autism diagnosis, to that ladder. And I mean, my dad he's worked for the Autistic Society, he works within kind of autism, and he does workshops for professionals, because it's particularly NHS staff, on how to make reasonable adjustments in the workplace. I think that's now part of the law, if I get that correct. So things are improving slowly, but yes, but in terms of referencing that to school, he was not happy that there was no adjustments made at all. And the big difference when I went to college, because the school wouldn't budge on it. First of all, I didn't have my diagnosis, so they said, with that piece of paper, we can't do anything. and that is not inclusion, essentially.
Is it difficult to get a diagnosis?
Yes, it's so hard. So I essentially got my diagnosis because, I got diagnosed, I went through the assessment at 17. It's a bit cheeky. My dad pushed me because he knew people within the area. My dad pushed me to get a diagnosis before I turned 18 because the waiting list for children is smaller than it is for adults.
Right.
If I'd have gone on to get diagnosis after I was 18, I would have been pushed behind by about 2 years, and it can be up to 4 years, if not longer. So I essentially got a bit lucky in that I was diagnosed whilst I was still at school. But if I hadn't had my parents to push that, then I might not even be diagnosed now, and I'm nearly 22.
What do you think some of the blocks are for getting a diagnosis?
Well, first of all, realising, because 90% of the study on autism is on boys, and not to kind of specify on gender, but there are some differences between different people.
Right.
Masking is much more of a common thing that I think, at least in some studies, that is typical for females. Obviously, genders is obviously not to specify specifically because it does vary, but in terms of like statistically, that's what they found so far. So a lot of it isn't brought up, and it's almost like, oh, if you don't get diagnosed by the time you're 7, then it's not something to worry about.
Okay.
And my dad sat me down and did this basically quiz, and it was a very, very basic version, but it's basically a quiz that basically, if you go over on a certain line, then you essentially got traits off. And he sat down and we do it, didn't tell me what it was, and went, yeah, that's, and then he took it back and he was like, do you want to know what this quiz was for? And I went, okay. And he went, I think you're autistic. And he knew that because he'd worked within the area. So it's that thing that you said, it's like the language games within you only understand the language of that particular thing if you're within that kind of circle already. So a lot of things aren't recognised because the only people that recognise them are the people that either have it or are, if you use Hannah's terminology, or that have worked within that area. Like, I think a lot of schools in particular, it's not taught in teacher training as much, or in generalised teacher training. I've always seen it as, because I volunteer for Girl Guiding, and a lot of the safeguarding stuff we did in that, like as a leader, it doesn't get taught. If you want to learn about it, if you want to do it, it has to be a module in addition. Okay. And then you have to do it on a separate day, and you have to organise it. And if it needs to be paid for, then that's in addition. It doesn't get included generally, as far as I'm aware. So that's something that could be improved. Because affect.
I was going to say, is there anything that works well for you?
So transition to college was a lot better because first thing they asked me, it's something as simple as asking the question, what can help you? Because I remember in school, they constantly said to me, like, well, there's various different things. First of all, they basically said to me, like, tell us what to do. And I was going, yeah, but I'm asking you because I don't know. I'm 14. I don't know what's going to help me. I'm at a school. You're supposed to help me, but you're not. Whereas college was the opposite. They extended that branch out like way before, and were like, right, proactive. Here are some examples if you can of ways that we can help you. I had my diagnosis then, but here's ways we can example. Here's a plan. It's not a wellbeing plan. I can't remember the name of the plan, but here's a plan that we have that we're going to tell all your teachers, that we can tell everybody in the class. We're going to tell your form tutor. Here's spaces you can go to for this. They offered all that before it even started. That was just over the summer. And that made me feel more reassured going into it. And then obviously throughout those 2 years, I had people I could contact if things came up that I wanted to, and kind of adjustments that were made. So I got my biggest one was, particularly with schools, because obviously it's exam orientated, was I got exam adjustments. I didn't have that in secondary school because they wouldn't let me because I didn't have official diagnosis documents. When I was in college, I had that, and that not only meant that I felt better generally, but I could actually do my work better because I had those adjustments made. So I'd say college was definitely improvement, and things that worked within college definitely should have been implemented in the schools. So it does vary. Appreciate
that. Thanks for sharing that, Maisie. I heard that you two have been working on a project. It all started from asking, what is the meaning of life? and then you ended up going down a rabbit hole and came up with some interesting information that if you'd be happy to share, I'd love to hear, and I think the listeners would love to hear it as well. I've seen some of the bits on your work, so I've got some questions. So the first question is, what makes school brown? Brown is it's an adjustment to something that rhymes with hit.
Another way of saying not very good.
Do you want to start, Hermione, while we wait for Skye?
Yeah, I will. I think some of the stuff is like, it's boring because you have to like sit still like for an hour or something and just listen to them talk, and you never get to do like anything. And you just have to sit there.
Right. Do you feel like you learn more by doing?
Yeah, I feel like because you can just get a bit bored if you sit down.
Absolutely. I remember I went to university and we had to do a questionnaire, and they said that I was a kinesthetic learner. So what that means is I learn by doing the actual thing that they're trying to show me. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Was there anything else?
Like trying to mask and stuff because like you don't want to show everyone.
Yeah.
But then it's like hard. I think Hannah said that earlier.
Yeah, I can imagine it's really draining, masking.
Yeah.
And then how does that make you feel when you go home? Because you've used all your energy.
You just
In
get
a
really
day.
tired and just go into bed.
And then you essentially can't enjoy things that you might enjoy outside of school because you're focusing on that energy to mask
Yeah.
when you're in the classroom. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. You got anything for me, Skye?
Yeah, teachers that don't like understand autism or like don't believe it.
I can imagine that's really frustrating, and you'd expect a teacher of all people in that profession to have some kind of understanding of autism. You would expect that, but
Yeah, I think teachers vary because there's many. I was intimidated by it. So he was actually quite a nice man, but I was intimidated by the way that he taught.
right,
So I wouldn't go and ask him for help.
okay,
And that was the subject, geography, as a subject that I needed help in. So something as simple as that, just the way he would pick on people randomly in class. And at that time I didn't have a diagnosis, but I was typically outlined as shy anyway. So every single parent's evening it was, she doesn't talk enough in class. Since know why, but it took us a while. But him picking on people in class only furthered my anxiety in that
Yeah.
class to the point where I didn't turn up sometimes, or I didn't want to go, and that did not help my education at all. So I think teachers understanding, going off of what Skye mentioned, and going off understanding autism in itself, and anxiety and like that kind of thing as well. I think
as well, even if they don't understand, just having an openness, do you know what I mean, to
I think
have a
it's
conversation
more
and just educate themselves.
not necessarily understanding it from a first person perspective, but more understanding that it's something that people have, or it's something that, you know, affects people, and then understanding what they can do about it. I think that's as if you're a teacher and you're not autistic, or you've never experienced mental health, then you're not going to understand it from a first person perspective. But you should at least understand that there's something that happens, and it's something you have to then accommodate to.
100%.
Which doesn't happen as frequently as maybe everyone would like to.
I'll move on to the next question that I saw. How can schools help?
Like knowing that all autistic people are different and like
Okay.
Not generalising people to the same
yeah.
box and the same rules.
Have you got anything for me, Hermione?
Like feeling safe and happy before learning, because I think that's a like big one. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
People can't learn if they're not comfortable.
100%.
Learn, or at least learn like properly.
And especially if you was masking as well. Do you get what I mean? If you're masking, that's just like, it's like there's one battle and then you don't feel safe and secure before you're learning. So I completely agree with that one.
And then if you don't feel safe, you won't like concentrate and everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
You're just constantly thinking, how do I get out of this classroom?
yeah.
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing.
One of the things that they both highlighted and put in capital letters and underlined was understand that children are not robot. And I think that links back to what Hannah was saying earlier as well about the sort of sausage factory and education and schools expecting everybody to be the same.
100%.
They'd literally written that one in capital letters and underlined.
No, I appreciate that one, definitely.
And another one that you'd said was really important at the time that you've written here was for teachers to think about what they're saying and how they're saying it. So even like tone of voice or
I think that's something that's become increasingly more important in recent years. There's particular awareness about not only like autism and mental health, and how it's not just about taking it things personally, but if they're covering a particular topic and then something comes up, and I've had various teachers where they've said things and I've gone like, do you think you should have said that, or did you think about that before you said it? Because that might not affect me necessarily, but I know somebody else next to me that just got affected by that, and they now don't want to come to your lessons because they think that you have these like pre-assumptions against them, or for whatever reason.
My mum always said, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Do you know what I mean? So,
And you'd written as well about being kind and nice, which sort of links in, doesn't it, as well? And what you were saying earlier as well about being asked by a teacher, that's something, Skye, you've always found tricky, isn't it? How does it make you feel if a teacher comes to you without you knowing?
Terrified, because once, like, kind of recently, a teacher threatened to give me a detention for not answering a question that I didn't even have my hand up for.
right.
And did you know the answer to it?
No, I couldn't find it in my book, so I wasn't there that day.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's kind of unfair, and I think they go off the standard. It's so rigid that
It's like
even
one
the
size fits
robots-
all, innit?
Yeah, like it's almost like particularly when you go later in secondary school, there's a lot of, I don't think might not be quite like this now, but it's kind of that thing of they tell you to go a particular way, and it's almost like, right, well, and going into the creativity, it's almost creativity is put to the side because you need to do maths, English, science,
100%.
and they're factoring kind of in terms of the robots that you mentioned. I like that a lot, because I think it's almost like they're not children aren't robots, and you're kind of trying to make them all into the same person when they leave school. So I mean, interests that you have now, I think you should be able to.
Because that's how it felt when I was at school, though. It's like if you wasn't academic, you was pushed to the side. Like they didn't really focus on you if you wasn't getting the scores up.
A
at
big
the
example, my dad, so he was born in the 50s, so he went to school in 60s, 70s, and he was sat down when he was about 14, I think, and they said to him, what do you want to do? Or I don't think they even said that to him. They said, based on your scores, here's your options. He wanted to go into creative writing, and they said to him, no, that's not going to get you a job. You won't be able to earn money. Don't do that. So he didn't. And it's taken him, he's now in his 60s, but it took him until his 50s to actually realise, he did social work for his entire life, basically, and then kind of semi-retired at 50, and he's still doing some of that work, particularly with autism. But alongside that, he's started writing poetry and now it's like published a book but he said, I wish I'd done that when I was in school, but it's the school that told me not to. And it's taken 40 years to get back round to fueling that interest. He says he's lost that interest for so long, didn't feel like himself. And now he's, 50, 60, and he's found it again. But he says that's a whole life, that's half a lifetime that he could have been doing that he hasn't. So
I saw one final question that you had on your sheets was, what makes school okay? What do you like about school, Hermione?
Not really many schools have this, I don't think, but we've got like a therapy dog at our school.
Is it?
So we can like go and see him, but we have to like ask. But yeah, that's quite.
Does that help, the therapy dog?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Arsenal got a dog at the training ground. Sorry, bit of sports spillover.
From a person that has a dog, I think dogs make the world better. Cats as well, pets, but dogs make the world a better place.
I've got a house rabbit. He just bops around the house.
Does it make you smile though when
I
you come
love
through the
him
front
so
door?
much,
Exactly.
So much.
It makes you forget your problems for
absolutely, man.
momentarily. So, yeah.
What about you, Skye? What makes school good for you?
Teachers who like understand autism.
Okay. Have you encountered many teachers that understand?
A few.
Okay. I'm sure we was talking earlier, you were saying that going into, was it secondary school, you were saying it was different to when you was in primary school?
Yeah.
Are you able to expand on how it was different?
Like the teachers feel like actual humans,
Right.
not like people who are just there.
I was going to say, do you feel like the teachers at secondary school are there for you rather than being there for their job?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's.
But then I'm going to play devil's advocate then. In primary school, do you think that they're trying to get you ready for secondary school? And it's more of, I don't know, man, it's hard to play devil's advocate right now when I'm saying it because there's no real excuse. But, you know, like, they're just trying to implement certain skills that you may need moving through the education ladder. Whereas when you get to secondary school, it's a bit more mature now. Do you get what I mean? They're treating you like you're a bit older, and or am I just going off on one? Am I
They don't.
Right,
There's
not.
Because of the interaction between students and teachers. Personally, I had more freedom at primary school than at secondary school to like be myself and be independent. There's still restrictions, but in secondary school, there's a lot of, you feel that because of the formality, and it depends on school, because at college it was different, but because of the formality of going Mr. So-and-so and Miss and Mrs. and Miss, you know, Sir, because you're using those, that alone makes you feel inferior to the teachers. And then usually if they're teaching quite traditionally, in the sense of, there's Hermione mentioned, they talk at you, and they're not engaging with you, they're just chucking information at you and then going, remember this.
Very rigid.
Yeah, it's so rigid. I think it doesn't. So actually, you don't feel like they're treating you older. They're essentially almost spoon feeding you information, and it's like, well, I don't want to eat that, thank you. So I think at least with school, I just think sometimes you don't actually feel like a grown up when you're a teenager. You don't feel like you get treated like it, because if you get told off and belittled for like the littlest things, it's like, okay, you don't abide by this rule, go and stand in the corner. And it's like, that's what you did when you were a toddler. So you don't have that development of feeling like an adult.
Completely.
For teachers that like children, because I think you guys are really perceptive, aren't you, in terms of actually, do the teachers like you, and are they sort of being kind and being nice? And I think it just depends on the ethos of the school.
Yeah.
I think you guys are really lucky to go to a school where the head teacher's very clear that they're not an exams factory. They're there for the children as individuals. And I think that's what's made such a difference to you guys getting on well. The impact of not getting it and not being kind and children not feeling safe is then anxiety about even going, getting out the car, getting up in the morning, even being able to go. And the difference between, I think, sitting in a classroom and thinking, are they going to ask me a question at any time and I don't have my hand up, can make you not feel like going to school, can't it? Yeah. But school were brilliant and they resolved that. And your tutor sent an email around all of the teachers saying, please don't ask Skye a question unless her hand is up. I think the great thing about this school is that they listen, and if there's something that you found difficult, they feel like they've not done well enough, they've apologised. Yeah. And so we're really sorry that that's happened. We're going to try and do it differently. And I think that when schools don't do that, and they're rigid and just, it goes back to that inclusion, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, you need to accept what we do or we're not changing it.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to ask. Does it make a difference knowing that if you do have an issue, that they're going to take note and try to resolve the issue rather than it's your problem and your problem alone? Does that make sense? It's just like in life. If you go, like I've worked in places where you say something and the situation doesn't get resolved. Do you get what I mean? And I think it makes all the difference whether you want to go work. Like I used to not want to go to work. Do you get what I mean? Whereas here at TMC, you have an issue, you speak about it. You know what it is? You're asked before you even realise there's an issue. Do you know what I mean? There's checks and check-ins and things like that. And I think check-ins are important.
Going off of that, I think that asking before you ask yourself, I think that, like I said, I was surprised when that happened at college. You sound like TMC. You were like, oh, you're asking me.
It's like,
that should become almost like the stand. That should almost be the standard of going, even if you're like new to a job or not new, it should be like, okay, do you need us to do anything? And then you're like, actually, yes, because then even if you're anxious about it, that gives you
an
platform to be an opportunity to basically go, they're asking me, so they care, so maybe, and then it might alleviate kind of alleviate, does that mean up or down?
Alleviates, like resolve. Like,
think of words. It alleviates the anxiety a little bit because you're like, oh, well, actually, it's not normal to ask this because they're asking me. So I think that
wicked
definitely helps.
Have you got anything else you want to share on what makes school okay, Hermione?
I say like understanding the small things that are like bigger to us.
Yeah.
And like, because it might be like small to them, but it's like massive to us.
100%, yeah. I agree.
there's a term that we came up with, adultizing, in terms of you as a young person, you present a problem or something you want resolved or an idea to an adult and they go, okay, yeah, and then put it in their context to put it into practice. And it's like, well, we told you it in our context, so can you carry forward our stuff, because we're not able to do that, particularly in like a professional atmosphere. You know, we're not at that point. We can't do that. But you don't need to turn it into a whole marketing thing, or you don't need to present it in a way that we just like, it meant this to us. You're attaching what it means to you to it. We're not asking you to do that. We just want you to literally just carry forward exactly what we've said to this particular environment, and then just actually do what we've told you to do, because you're not, in a sense, or it's not coming along as well as they think it is. Because I think everyone has different expectations, and what young people get from school is very different than what adults would
even see.
Yeah, even parents, like what parents want their children to get from school can sometimes, even though usually, fingers crossed, it would be the best and the best for that child, but still their perception of school is still very different from what their child experiences. Because
a parent's experience of school is their experience of school. They don't really know the experience of the young person, I suppose, their child.
Yeah, they'll kind of know obviously what goes on at home, but they only know via what teachers say and what their child says, what goes on in the classroom. So I think it must be a struggle essentially to actually, like, I know my parents, the reason I managed to get help was because my parents pushed it, but they struggled to know where to push, when to push, how to push, because they weren't in that atmosphere. And then they couldn't help. They could reassure me and comfort me when I was at home, but they couldn't, all they could do is basically gear me up in the morning to be like, go in, you'll be here when you come back, and try and be positive and stuff, and give me ways to cope with things. But it was up to me alone to cope with it in that situation, because the teachers wouldn't help. So I think, particularly as a young person, you I wouldn't necessarily say you need adults to guide you, but it's nice. Yeah, it's helpful. Yeah. So I think having a bit more stuff there to support would be
appreciate
nice.
It. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Hermione. Thank you, Skye. Really appreciated your input today, and thanks for coming. Hopefully you'll come again and let me know about your street dance, Hermione. Yeah, so moving on to the next part is a question. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Trust yourself in terms of instincts, in terms of what you want. So one thing that I know, I suppose I've been lucky to have, but I've always had quite a very strong sense of self. It's just that that's not aligned with what other people want from me. And it's only since going to university and basically leaving home that I've managed to bring that out. And I think if I'd have, and that's because, for example, when I was in school and they said, oh, you can't do this, we just went along with it. It was like, okay, yeah, well, there's other things going on that we need to deal with. Do it for the sake of doing it to get through it. And I think if I just said, maybe thought a bit more to do what I want to do and have things change to what suits me, which is sort of similar to how it is now at university, I think that would have been something I would have benefited from.
I like that. Hermione, have you got anything that you tell your younger self? You're quite young right now, sorry, I apologise.
Probably say, like, never give up and, like, keep going or something.
I like that, yeah, that's brilliant. I like that. Skye, you got anything for me?
I don't really know.
You know what I tell myself? Don't worry, it's going to be all right. And I know that sounds really corny, but I just think as a youngster, sometimes you just needed to hear that, because I think what we've all shared today is we built things up in our own head. You know what I mean? And all it took was a trusted adult, someone that we looked up to say, don't worry, it's going to be all right. Do you get what I mean? Like you were saying about teachers now, like you explain to them a scenario, they attempt to resolve it. Do you get what I mean? I think that's all you ask for. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. So that's what I tell my younger self. What about you, Hannah?
I think there's quite a lot of things I would tell my younger self, but the main thing I think I would say to them is that I know that trust is scary and you have so much fear in forming relationships with people, but the world isn't all bad, and there are people out there who are trustworthy and safe, and you do deserve those trustworthy and safe people, and that in life there's lots of ups and downs, but you will find the life worth living. You will find who you are and what that means, and never ever change yourself for anybody else. Don't ever apologize for being your authentic self. Never apologize for anything that is doesn't need to be apologized for, like in terms of who you are and the fact that there is hope, and there is a life out there that is worth living. And in this life, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you.
Thank you, appreciate that. So that's the Mighty Voices podcast. My name's Levi Knight, the Youth Program Coordinator for TMC. Thank you to our guests, Skye, Hermione, Hannah and Maisie. It's been wonderful. See you next episode.